get your food. That's important. And then you can sit down. As always, there are seats up here at the front of the room. And I think it's an unwritten rule that if you walk in late and you're like the last ones in the food line, you're supposed to sit up in the front of the room. My name is Richard Inouye. My title is Vice Provost of Graduate Studies here. I basically manage the graduate school. I used to be part of the Office of Research and Graduate Studies. Graduate school is now part of the Provost Office. So ignore the header on the top of your notepad here. Or you can take one of these with you as a historical artifact, because the Office of Research and Graduate Studies is no more. There is still an Office of Research, and there is now a graduate school, which is part of the Provost Office. We are going to continue our grid sessions, though. They, I think, have been well received. I think there's been some great feedback that we've gotten about those. And I believe this is our last one for the year. I guess you can look at this as an opportunity to learn how to go out and speak more convincingly this summer, and go out and practice these skills while you're away from campus during the summer, if you're going away from campus. If you're staying, how many of you are going to be on campus doing work, like research this summer? Okay, good. So there'll be some empty classrooms. You can go and stand in those classrooms and practice speaking. There'll be opportunities, with people sitting outside when the weather's nice. You can go out and stand in front of them and practice speaking persuasively. So look for those opportunities. One thing to always think about, we talk about giving elevator speeches. That's a great thing for a graduate student to know how to do. Get in an elevator, you've got 90 seconds to convince somebody that what you're doing is really exciting and that they ought to ride up or down a few more floors just so you can get a little bit more detail. But that's one of the things that you should be developing. That's a skill that you should be developing as a graduate student or any kind of professional, is quickly telling somebody in a convincing way what you're doing, conveying your excitement and your passion to that so that they're interested and they want to learn more. So that's the point of today's group session. We have somebody to come and talk to you. As always, we are looking for your feedback, and if you are convinced by what you learned today, what you hear today, then you can provide that as feedback on these cards. If you have suggestions for topics for grid sessions next year, we have not yet planned that out, and we will be. So we're always looking for input about that. So Claire, why don't you come on up? You were with the Department of Communications. What's the official title?
Housed in the Languages, Philosophy, and Communication Studies.
Yes, right? Language, Philosophy, and Communication Studies, which I guess you can decide whether you think all those things really go together all that time, but they do. We also have a Department of Sociology, Social Work, and Anthropology, so there's some combining of departments at one point. But Claire's going to talk to you about persuasive public speaking.
Yeah. So I'm not going to talk about philosophy. I'm not going to speak in another language other than English. I'm definitely sticking in the communication studies realm. That's my wheelhouse. I know that many of you may have come for the nice spread. I too was a starting graduate student at one point, but there may be a few of you who are also here for some additional reasons. Tell me a little bit about what you would hope to get out of this. What would bring you to a session on public speaking? Because for most people, they don't enjoy it at all. So what would you hope to get out of it? What brings you in? Yeah.
So two things. One is I come from a communications background. I always am interested in learning.
Yeah.
But also my research has developed a project that I want to use for myself.
Yeah. What's your degree in? What are you studying?
Right now,
Okay, great. Yeah, there's definitely a connection there in terms of whether or not you'll be effective in taking all these things you're researching, you do well, you'd like to get funding for it, you'd like to get out there, and how effective can you be in expressing those things and getting those ideas across. Excellent. Great reason to come. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'm not a speaker, so I'm really interested in how you can get
Yeah. Okay. Like to get better, it just doesn't feel like something that you're not sure of.
I'm a master's in sociology. I speak somewhat. I don't mind speaking in front of people, but I tend to ramble. So I'm hoping to get some points on how to speak better, be a little more organized, be a little more effective.
Yeah, that's good that you don't have too much of an issue like standing in front of people. It's actually, though, for many, pretty nerve-wracking. Like it's a fear for many people. They in fact have done studies in the U.S. pretty regularly that look at what are people's main fears. And there was one year that showed up in a bit on Seinfeld where they did the research, and do you know what the #1 fear was of all the people they told? Public speaking. Yeah. #2 was death. Death was #2. Which means if you're at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy, right? Like for about 10% of the population, public speaking is something that they actually enjoy. They get a bit of a thrill or rush from it. You're nodding your head, you kind of enjoy it. Yeah, so you're one of those few, that 10%. About 10 to 20% are mortified by it, get really heavy anxiety. And then the rest of us, 80%, have kind of just a healthy discomfort about doing it. So it's not unusual for people to feel like they're not good at it because they're a little bit afraid and nervous. I actually fall into kind of that lower group, believe it or not. When I was a kid, I was pretty terrified of crowds, any crowds. So one of the first words I learned was hot. And my parents took me to a restaurant one time. I got in and I saw the people and I just started yelling, hot, 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 till they took me out because I couldn't be around all those people. I didn't make it through any of the church services that they took me to growing up till I was about 5 years old. Like I would just freak out. They'd have to take me out into the hallway. Yeah, you were there too? It might, yeah. If you just start yelling hot, 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 they might kick you out or escort you from the room. I mean, I was so nervous about interacting with people that one of my first jobs as a paper boy was perfect for me, right? Because I could just go around and flip papers, ride my bike around the small town I was in. But once a month, I would have to go and collect the money. And there was one house that I so didn't want to talk to them, but I paid for their subscription out of my own earnings. And so I wouldn't have to go up and talk to them at the door. So even if you fall into that category of feeling really anxious, and that still happens to me, particularly before really important speeches, it's possible to learn how to deal with that. I think most people wouldn't guess anymore that it creates anxiety for me because of the way I practice and things that I've done. So you don't have to naturally enjoy doing this. But if you want to be effective and you know that that's something important, you're going to have to figure out, how do I do this in a way that I can get past anxiety and fear, and I can do it in a way that's going to make a difference. It's a skill that's going to make a difference in pretty much any degree. Do I have any engineers in here? Yeah. So I've worked with engineers pretty extensively because oftentimes the stereotype of engineers, right, is you're in a basement somewhere by yourself creating things, right, and you don't have to actually talk to anyone, and maybe that's even what draws you to it initially. But eventually, you're going to have to work in a team because problems take more than one mind to solve, and eventually you're going to have to get somebody to fund you, or you're going to have to explain all the brilliant things that are in your mind to somebody else that has no idea what you're talking about. All of these things are challenging. I always told engineers, communication is engineering. You can't separate those two. So I hope to give you a few things that will make you feel a little bit more confident and capable of being effective. Because I don't know the specifics of the type of context you're going to find yourself in speaking. Maybe you're going to be making pitches or trying to share your ideas. Maybe you're going to be trying to work in a team and explain your part of the project. Maybe you're going to be in an elevator and you're trying to pitch this idea to somebody. There's communities, there are all sorts of situations in which these skills are called for, but each one is unique and different. But what remains the same is some fundamental underlying principles that can help you be effective no matter what the context is, the situation is, how much time you have, what's your subject. There's 4 things. The first one is getting really clear about what your purpose is when you are speaking, when you're giving your presentation. And this may seem really obvious, but surprisingly, I've seen a lot of presentations where I cannot figure out what the point is. Have you ever been in a few of those? Like you are racking your mind, like, I know you're saying stuff, you've said a lot of stuff, some of it's interesting, but I don't know where you're going with it. I don't know where you're headed. And that's important. Any of you familiar with Alice in Wonderland? Yeah, a fairy tale or the cartoon. So there's a moment in Alice in Wonderland where she comes upon a fork in the path. And that's when the Cheshire Cat. And she sees the Cheshire Cat, and she says, you know, what road should I take? And he responds, well, where are you going? So, I don't know. So it doesn't particularly matter which path you take, because any of them will get you there. If you don't have a direction, a place that you're headed, anything will get you there. And sometimes people approach a speech by saying, oh, I've got 15 minutes for this presentation. How do I fill 15 minutes? That's the wrong approach, right? You can fill it any number of ways. So you can stand up there and, I don't know, do comedy for 15 minutes, you know, make it your stand-up improv hour. That's a way to fill 15 minutes, but it's not going to accomplish what you want it to. So start with why. Start with what am I trying to accomplish here? What's my purpose? So if you're thinking about what you've got coming ahead, what would be your key purpose for the speech that you're imagining yourself giving around your research? What would you be trying to accomplish there? Okay. How come? Why do you want that? And if we don't ask ourselves these questions, it's really hard to expect that an audience is going to figure it out, right? So when you initially said that, and you're like, I want them to understand why it's important, what is important about that? Why do you want them to understand it's important? Yeah, and you want their checkbooks open, and you want to be funded. That's truly the purpose of your speech, isn't it? Funding. And the way to get to funding is, this is important. Let me explain to you why it's important. But truly the purpose is, I want you to write me a check. And that needs to be the driving focus of everything you say. You don't have to spend the whole time saying, I want you to write me a check. But everything you are saying is supposed to get them towards, wow, this is really important, this is really important, so that when you do ask them that, they will. Let's see your hand as well.
I just say, many things I go to, we choose classes, teachers, but if there's a their goal is simply to fill the time, not to look stupid and perhaps entertain.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a terrible goal not to look stupid. I'm a big fan of that. Like anytime I speak, I'm hoping not to look stupid. I don't want to fall down. I don't want to stumble on my words. This is pretty normal. But in reality, who's it really about once I start speaking? I've got to have a goal, what I want to accomplish. But then, where does the focus need to be? Once I figure it out, I'm trying to get them to write me a check. Who do you now need to start thinking about? Not yourself, but the audience. Audiences are always thinking about themselves. Now, as you've been sitting here talking, how many of you have wondered, like, oh, I wonder how he's feeling right now, and like how he feels about this group and his response and what he plans on saying next. And none of you are thinking about that, right? You're sitting there like, I'm less hungry than I was before. I'm not asleep yet. I'm glad. Can I get anything out of this? Why am I still here? Why am I still sitting here? You are constantly thinking about what does this have to do with me? And I'm glad, right? Because that's what public speaking allows to happen, is something valuable for the people we're speaking to. What does this do for them? Which is why once you figure out your purpose and what you want to accomplish, your focus needs to shift to who you're talking to. And I'm not trying to jump scare you here, right, by putting this up, but how many of you have seen or read It by Stephen King? Okay, now, scary clown. This is, yes, clowns are scary, almost generally speaking, but not for everybody. Are creepy clowns scary to everybody? No. So what is it that Pennywise does to scare the people he's trying to scare? Because that's what he kind of feeds on, right? He feeds on their fear, just like I feed on the tears of my students. But he feeds on fear. This is what he's trying to get out of the people that he's scaring. So what does he do? He changes his shape. He changes his tactic. Is not just to be a creepy clown. That's his everyday attire, right? He gets up in the morning and he's a creepy clown. But when it comes to the moment that he's trying to scare his target, he adapts every time to the thing that they fear most. How many of you are familiar with that Bogart's from Harry Potter? It's a similar type of thing, right? I couldn't put a Bogart up here because nobody knows what they actually look like. They change depending upon their target. They become the thing that they fear the most. So for Harry Potter, it's the Mentor. For Ron, giant spider. And the Bogart changes every time to create the maximum response from his audience. So as you think about this, how do you go about adapting what you say to the audience you're speaking to? Practically speaking, how do you do that?
Part of the time, you know, you have an audience children or audience.
Yeah. This is a great example, right? So we've got a baby here, right? Now, if I went up to the baby and anybody would do this, would I be like, hello, young human being. Pleasure to have you in my company. Like, nobody talks to babies like that, right? What do? They're like, oh, right? Everybody's pitch shoots up 3 octaves, and we're like, oh, it's okay. And we start baby talking. I don't recommend doing that to people other than babies. Like, you probably shouldn't do that on the first date. It's not how you should approach your graduate instructors. Like, these are not the ways that you want to communicate with them. You want to adapt to them. So it's going to be your language, even your tone, the voice, the words that you use. Yeah. Sure. The whole organization of how you put it together. Now, you were talking about doing a speech for people that you want to invest in your particular research, right? In what ways are you going to talk very differently to them than you would to your fellow graduate students who are studying similar things to you? Yeah, because that's what they care about. That's what they know. That's what they understand. So you can talk to them in an entirely different way. Are there things that are super important to them and to you that you will never mention to investors because it's irrelevant? It's not necessarily going to help them open up the checkbook. You're going to focus with them on a different way of talking, different way of organizing, different focus. Okay. Other examples you can think of? Adapting to your audience. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and whether jokes might work, they might not, right? It all depends on your audience, but that's a really good recognition. That if I can see my audience is fading, their attention is gone, I need to think about how do I regain it? What matters to them? When you get distracted, what are the things that you're thinking about? What do you get distracted by instead of paying attention? Because I know it's happened. I've spoken for about 10 minutes. And I know how many of you thought about the different class that you've got to do today? Thought about the research, you thought about a significant other, another relationship, thought about food, grocery lists. But, okay, yeah, nodding heads, nodding heads. I realize, even though I've got golden nuggets coming out of my mouth, you all have not just been hanging on every word, because your brain has the capacity to process more than just what I'm saying. And it's possible for audiences to get distracted by that stuff, which is why one of the things you want to focus on as a fundamental principle is maximizing the signal to noise ratio. See here, I imagine, I saw a picture like this with March Madness last week, where it showed like a big lecture hall and everybody's laptops up, and like 90% of them had the game on while they were doing it. There are all sorts of distractions that occur. In fact, you can organize it around 3 P's. 3 P's of noise: physiological, psychological, and physical. So physiological noise is all the noise that happens within your own body. How many of you have a hard time listening, paying attention when it's hot in the room? That's all that consumes your energy or focus, right? Is, oh my gosh, it's so hot, or it's so cold. Or how many of you have a difficult time focusing when you're hungry? There's a reason why they feed you before I start talking. Right? Because you're less able to keep that focus. It creates a physiological noise for you. Then they do some studies on parole boards, and they looked at the percentages of parolees that were given parole at certain times of the day. You know what the parole percentage was from 11 to 12? If that's when they had their parole hearing? 0%. After lunch, from 1 to 2 was 60%. So if you're like me, if you're hungry, you get a little fussy, you get a little hangry. I mean, you have a hard time listening when you're tired. Yeah, sick. Yeah, all of these things, physiologically, there's going to be noise that you're dealing with in your audience. And then there's the physical noise that you have to deal with. That's anything that's happening external. What are some examples in here of some physical noise that you can catch? Yeah, you can hear the doors opening, you can hear them talking, that type of thing. It comes in and creates potential noise and distraction. What else? It's not just what you hear. Physical noise can, yeah, how many of you are noticing when people walk by? Or sure, that's normal. I remember one time when I was teaching and I had a door in the back of the room like this, and somebody walked up to the door and they had a horse head on, and you just stood there in the door. And then they walked away. And I was distracted. And everybody that looked back at the person wearing the horse head was distracted. And that's part of what you're dealing with as a speaker, is that kind of physical noise around you. And then there's the psychological noise. It's everything you're thinking about. Remember I mentioned all those things that you thought about since I started talking? And I mean, it's a type of noise that's so ubiquitous that sometimes we can get to the point where we're not even noticing it. And you're graduate students, so I probably don't have as many of you who are still trying to figure out what ubiquitous means. But if that was a word, and was that confusing to anyone? And you're like, wait, what does that mean? Can I figure it out in context? Should I know what ubiquitous means? Like that would be something that could just create a psychological noise for your audience. Look how someone just closed the door for me. When we're speaking, we're trying to maximize the ratio between your signal and the noise that you're facing. And there are some things you can do to just diminish the noise that you're facing, like shutting the door, changing the temperature in the room, drawing the blinds. All those things have the capacity to bring that noise level down, feed you, bring the noise level down. And then you want to think about, how do I boost this signal that I'm giving? That happens through your organizational structure, through your voice, your delivery, all of those things that can make what you say much more effective than, say, if somebody was reading. This is why we have orator and public speaking, instead of just giving people summary documents. Because a summary document doesn't come out of somebody's body. And there's something that happens when you speak it, and another person hears it and witnesses it that is entirely different than that other type of communication. You've got to figure out, how do I make my signal lucid, effective? That makes sense? Then the fourth one is to be able to use effective repetition. Because most people, when they hear something, forget half of it immediately. So, could you repeat back everything that I've said? Of course not. You can't do that in lectures, no matter how much you are paying attention. Even if you're really focused in, you notice how easy it is to forget what you're doing. Which is why effective repetition is a powerful rhetorical device. It's something that you need, not because your audience isn't paying attention or they're not bright. You're some of the brightest people on this campus. I don't doubt that you're paying attention and you understand these things. But yet you still deal with the fact that you forget things really easily. It degrades over time. You forget half of it immediately. And then they suggest that for an undergraduate student after 4 years, you know how much of their education they remember? They say it averages right around 20%. That sounds about right. And we have some classes who've forgotten 100% of what happened in there. It's difficult to retain, which is why you write things down and things like that. But as a speaker, you have to remember, I'm dealing with that difficulty. People forget. And if I want to get my idea across, and it's important, and I know what my purpose is, I better repeat what that is. And there are many different ways you can build effective repetition into your speaking. For example, the basic strategy of how people organize information is almost the same, no matter what you are talking about. You all know the 3 pieces, organizational, that pretty much every speech has. Intro, a body, and a conclusion. Because you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them. This is what we do, right? That's structurally how we put it together, because the first thing you need to do is let people see where we're going. Here's what we're about to talk about. It immediately cues them in, and they start thinking about how that relates to what they already know. They understand where it's going, and then you fill in the details. You tell them everything about what you just previewed, and then in the conclusion, you tell them again. You tell them everything you just told them. And that is fundamentally how every structure looks in writing and speaking, because of how important effective repetition is. And then you can do it in other ways too. My favorite example of effective repetition is that. And what are you looking at? What's that? Stop sign. You all know that's a stop sign, don't you? Even though it is 90% concealed. Because a stop sign is one of my favorite examples of effective repetition. It has three really useful layers. The first layer is it says stop. So you look at it and you know what to do. It tells you exactly what it's trying to get across. Stop. Whatever you're doing right now, stop. Stop that thing. And then the next layer is, what shape is it? It's an octagon. And what other signs use that shape? None. None. You can look and see the octagon shape, and you know, without seeing anything else, that you're supposed to stop. And then what color is it? What is the color red used for? It is stop. It is the only color that is used to indicate stopping, which is why your tail lights are red. Why flashing lights at a crosswalk, a train crossing, are red. That's why it's a red light and a stoplight. Red always means stop. 3 layers, right on top of each other, because stopping is important. I'm glad that this is so easy to pick up on and recognize that people actually stop, even when it's concealed by a tree. I ride a motorcycle and I don't want to be running into it. Please stop when you're supposed to stop. Right? And this is what you want to do in your speeches as well. What are examples of how you can layer effective repetition? This is different than redundancy. Redundancy is different than repetition, right? What does effective repetition look like? Yeah, an example is an item of effective repetition. You explained it straight on, and then you took an example. You understand that same thing in a different way. Yeah.
So if it doesn't relate to that goal, then what?
Yeah. You have to keep finding ways to bring it back. Re-emphasize, training to be the example. It can be through your delivery. How many effective keys are there? How many keys are there to effective? 4. Yeah. And I said it, and you just showed me also the thing that I did. It's 4, right? This is different than saying the word 4, but it's just a form of effective repetition, something to back up, to repeat, to reinforce what you're trying to get across. Okay. How do you make sense of these 4 things? What kind of questions do you have? Do you see how they work together to support your effectiveness? Yeah. Yeah. So you start with knowing your purpose, what that is. Second, you start adapting to your audience. You got to think about what is important to them, how do I use language, examples, all those things that match the audience I'm speaking. And you have, you got to maximize the signal and noise of your show. Reduce the noise as much as you can, boost the signal as much as you can. And then we have effective repetition, which is why I asked you to do those 4 things instead of me saying them. Because it's more effective and it's different for you to have to answer it than for me to say it again. Good. How else are you making sense of this? How does this relate to your own speaking? How do you affect it? Yeah. How does that enhance the curriculum skills? Speaking itself. What do you find for yourself barriers? What makes it difficult? Yeah. Yeah. So you're worrying about the content, which makes it difficult for you to pay attention to the other things. It's really significant, right? Because when you look at speeches, you're not just looking at the content, but how we deliver it. Which is why you can have incredible content and have it just, yes. And you can have incredible delivery too, but you've got to have something to check about. Both of these things are crucial. So you asked a really good question there, then. With my vocal qualities, with all elements of my delivery, which is about that signal, there's two things that are important. One is purposefulness, and the second is clarity. You mentioned tone. I don't have a problem with anybody's tone that I really ever with, except for there's that one character on Friends. Janice, remember Janice? Yeah. Janice's tone, I don't know. I don't know if I could listen to that for very long. But for the most part, I've never really listened to any other speaker that their tone was a problem for me. But what is a problem is if their tone looks like this. Just the term monotone, one tone. How many of you have listened to a speaker who has no variance in the tone and where everything sounds exactly the same as everything else does? What does that do to your voice? Fills it. It's just like what you get on EKG if you are dead, right? It's just a monotone right across the middle, and you will do that to your audience too. So it's not about having a particular tone, it's about having variance in it. It's got to go up, it's got to go down, it's got to be different. Because that's the thing that the brain picks up on, is the difference. But you don't want to just be talking like this in a random way also, because the shifting of the tone should have a reason why you're doing it, right? Have purpose behind the variance. So what would be moments in which you would want to shift your tone? Okay, so when you really know what that key purpose is and you're trying to drive it home, maybe that's the moment when your tone shifts, your volume shifts, and you move forward to the audience, right? And you use a hand gesture instead of just constantly doing this with your hands. Like, what do I do with my hands? It's about having some variance and a reason for doing it. Purpose. Yeah. So that's a good example of you want to really get across an idea. What are other examples when you would want to have that variance? Yeah.
So we were presenting like a list of 4 things, like number 1 and number 2.
Yes. Transitionally, we can indicate to people, okay, here's something important that we're moving. I frequently will transition with my body and with movement when I go from one idea to another, because it's just reinforcing and it's helping the audience to see, oh, now we're going over to this new idea, right? Instead of just pacing back and forth, which you've maybe seen people do before, and you're just like stuck doing that thing, right? Have a reason for why you're moving. That help? And you can apply that to anything. You can apply it to your movement, your voice, your eye contact. Right? You don't want me to, eye contact can be good, but do you want me doing this the entire 60 minutes that I'm talking? No, I better switch it up a little bit, right? Because you're about to get uncomfortable. A few more seconds, and it's going to start to feel really uncomfortable, right? So maybe we have a little bit of variance and a reason. I looked at you because you asked the question. Good. Other examples you can think of? With delivery, boosting your signal through variance, purposeful. It's not always about going up. Sometimes it's about going down. You get quiet. You pause. That's a moment where you can bring attention. Give the audience a moment to think about the importance of what we say. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Do you ride a bike? You know how to ride a bike? What's something you're good at? Something you like? Playing instruments? You having skill? Play the guitar. Okay. Do you have to think anymore about playing the guitar? You just pick it up and play. So you're natural. Yeah. Because that's why you're able to do that now. It doesn't come naturally necessarily to anybody. I think some people start with some skills or some abilities or a level of comfort that's different from other people. But I don't think it's natural for anybody to do it. Because there's a performative act to it, isn't it? Like, I don't, nowhere else in my life do I go like this when I'm conversing with other people. But this is my home base, right, for when I'm speaking, because I feel uncomfortable if I don't have somewhere for my hands to go. And what they used to do, they would go in my pockets, or they would do things that would distract the audience. So I practiced and I learned this is my home base. And this, I now feel comfortable here. And that's the place where I then will go from to make a gesture or something like that. All of that happened through reps and practice and making a determined effort to get better at it. I was not good at this naturally. The first time I gave, one of the first times I gave a significant, in my mind, one of the first times I gave an important speech or a long speech was when I taught a class when I was an undergraduate teaching assistant. And my teacher went out of town to do a conference, and she had a 3-hour night class. I had missed tough to miss an entire week, so she invited me to teach it. So I had a 3-hour night class. That's bad. So I brought my spouse to come watch me, so that I could get some support and that type of thing. And that's really what I was looking for. But afterwards, I'm like, oh my God. And she's like, you always touch your face. You touching your face. Right? So I was, like, as I was talking, I would just, like, incessantly touch my face. And then she's like, also, you're crossing your legs. Like, why do you do that? Like, I would do this thing where I would, like, cross my legs when I was standing behind someone. And then she's like, you really got to keep your hands. You should stop. She just had a laundry list of things that I was doing that were completely distracting to her, because these are the things she notices. Like when I'm watching a basketball game, she'll be like, oh, did you see that fan on the third row, what they just did? I'm like, that's not what I'm paying attention to. Like, I'm watching the game. But she sees other things. She's noticing that kind of stuff. And when I was speaking, she was noticing everything I was doing. It was distracting. And there was nothing natural about my ability as a speaker. So I had to practice. I had to practice learning what to do with my body, what to do with my hands, what to do with my voice, and I had to then figure out, how do I use the tension that I feel when I'm speaking? How do I become more confident? So with TEDx, for example, I changed my speech 10 times before I gave it, including the night before I gave it. How much time do I really have to practice if I changed it 12 hours before I'm giving it? I didn't, but I had had years of reps before that, just in basic delivery. And I had been practicing the ideas of it for months. So I wish there was an easy answer, or a pill that you could take. And it's not like imagine your audience naked or those other ridiculous things that people tell you to do. Just practice. Practice and you'll get better at it. Yeah. Yeah, you probably noticed that there have been speakers that you like that have gone through that you feel are really effective that are nothing like each other. But some people are really funny. Me, at least to myself. Like, I find myself very amusing. but it's not for everybody. And not everybody is a joke teller. Not everybody is serious. Not everybody moves around. Not everybody speaks with their hands. But you can be effective no matter who you are as a speaker. So I think part of it is embracing who am I as a speaker? What's my voice? Because if you just try and copy me, you'll be a poor replication of that, right? You can only be you the best. Me, you're never going to be me. You're going to be anybody else. Martin Luther King Jr., I Have a Dream speech is my all-time favorite speech. And I cannot speak like that. I don't want to speak like that. He's a son of a preacher. He's a preacher. And he has a very remarkable kind of cadence and tone and rising volume that is very much him. And I don't think anybody else should try to mimic that. I think they should find what they are and then bring that out to its fullness. So these are things that don't require you to speak a particular way. You can use purposeful variant delivery and effective repetition in the way that makes sense to you and the way that feels right. Because I think anytime you give a speech you want to finish and feel like, yeah, that was me. And that was the best I could do today. I've never seen a perfect speech. Everybody's always improving. I've got a lot of reps now and a lot of years. I'm like, I've never given a perfect speech. But it's the best I can do right now, and I feel satisfied with that. Versus when I try and be somebody else right now. Does that speak to your question, or do you have other questions? One of the things is I think we first start with, what do I care about? What am I passionate about? Why am I here? What do I want to accomplish? If I can't connect with that, I have a really hard time. I don't have the passion to bring me through the research process. I don't have the will to deal with the anxiety that it creates in me, as I said. I've got to want to do the thing. Now, most of the time, when people ask me to do something, including this, and when I spoke last Monday during Health Week with Life and Life, and when I spoke at TEDx, and like all those things, the first thing my mind says when somebody asks me to do it is no, I don't want to do that thing. I definitely don't want to do that. That's going to make me anxious. I know I'm going to have some sleepless nights. No. And then I say yes, because I think about, like, what is this an opportunity to do? And I really care about students. I care about certain ideas. I'm a big fan of transformative processes. I like talking about it. Even though I know it's going to make me anxious, it's going to take time, I might never be compensated for it. Why am I doing this stuff? No. Say yes because I have a reason, right? So I think that's a starting point. Figure out your why, what you want to be there for, and what you're trying to get across, and what's important. And that'll immediately open up, here's the kind of speaker I want to be, what I want to say, give you the energy to do that. Can you repeat your question again? Because I started talking and I'm excited, lost sight of the two questions, so let's get back to it. So it's find out what's really important to you, and then figure out what you are comfortable with, what truly sounds like you. And I think once you get in touch with that, you start to find your own creativity, and you want to put things together. Why organize things differently than other people? Because it's a way that makes sense to me. It matches up with me as a person and my value. Are these things helping you to kind of consider for yourself what you want to be as a speaker?
I was wondering, what is your practicing look like? So I'm gonna go through and I can like memorize what I'm going to say. I'll be kind of going through it as I brush my hair, you know, get ready, that type of thing. But then when I go and actually present, it's fine, you know, but I'm gonna say back out while I'm getting it, and I just kind of talk, and so I'm worried that like the pauses I don't have. So how do you actually practice when you are thinking about like variety?
Yeah, this is a big question, isn't it? The way I'm understanding it is at first, how do you deal with the anxiety that comes with speaking, which can create situations where when I'm actually speaking, I forget things, I can't concentrate on this. So how do I practice in a way, how do I prepare in a way that I'll feel confident when I'm giving? What does that look like? Yeah. Okay. So the first thing is to recognize that being nervous and anxious about it is not inherently a bad thing. I worry about speakers who never get nervous because I don't know if they care, right? Like when you care, you're immediately going to experience pain and suffering. This is a reality of life, isn't it? Have you ever heard the quote from Dalai Lama, all attachment leads to suffering? Yeah, it does. As soon as you care about something and attach yourself to it, it's going to lead to suffering, either because it requires effort, energy to bring that thing, to maintain that thing, because it's going to change, ways be lost, even your own identity. If you get attached to yourself, it can bring you suffering, right? When that identity changes, shifts over time. So I'm glad that you feel anxious about it, because that means you care. And I am a big fan of people who care. And you can tell when a person's talking and they don't care about what they're talking about, don't you? And that, I can handle that. Like if you don't care, why should I? So that anxiety is starting from the place of you caring about yourself, about what you're talking about the people you're talking to. It's caring somewhere. So that's good. That's naturally going to bring some anxiety. What we don't want it to do is to debilitate you. And that debilitation is when we get into the fight, flight, or freeze trauma response that some people experience when they're talking. How many of you, when you talk, your mind just goes blank? You freeze. That's a trauma response. How many of you fight? You're like, here I am, I'm going to say all the things that I prepared and I'm going to say, and you're going to listen, I'm not moving, and I'm just going to get through it, and the end, and sit down, it's like, ha. Or how many of you feel like backing away from the audience, or if you could, you want to run out of the room? Yeah, fight, flight, freeze, all of those are a response to that anxiety, that fear that can bring about a trauma response. So how do we manage that? It happens in 3 different phases because the anxiety exists in different ways in those 3 phases. The first one is in your preparation, your pre-speech phase. It's when you say yes, and you start thinking about it. What do I want to say? And what's important here? When you start thinking about that, what kind of anxiety comes up? And what does it make you want to do? How do you respond? Some people start procrastinating. And they do that. I'll put it out of your mind. I care, and I know that if I practice, I'm not going to do well, but I feel anxious about it, and so I push it off, but I don't have to feel that anxiety. And that, what does that procrastination do to you? You actually end up having to speak, yeah. So that's one of the things behavioral people do. Or they feel really intense emotion, and so they numb it out by, well, I can think about this right now. I watched another episode on Netflix of Grey's Anatomy, and now I'm 3 seasons in, and I still haven't written my speech. But because every time I get thinking about it, I need to numb out those intense emotions. And so we have to learn some skills that will help us manage how it feels and what we do behaviorally. So some things that work really well is practice and prepare. I know but that's not necessarily what you want to do. But the more you practice and prepare, the more confident you will feel, the more capable of dealing with anxiety. Breathe. Breathing is what you can do most effectively to impact your physiological response to the anxiety. And you all know what happens to your breathing when you're feeling anxious? It gets really shallow and gets really thick, right? It happens like, right? That's what anxious breathing is in your body. So if you take a deep breath, you feel your lungs, and then release it fully. You take 4 or 5 deep breaths like that. You can change physiologically what's going on in anxiety. Positive visualization. And the problems people have when they get anxious is they start thinking about the absolute worst that's going to happen. They begin catastrophizing, right? Like, oh no, I'm going to have to give this speech, and I'm going to forget everything that I was going to say, and then I'm going to triple myself, and then everyone's going to laugh at me. No one will respect me. I won't have any more friends. I'll be a pariah at Utah State. I'm going to end up living in a van down by the river. Right? It's like we can quickly escalate that negative self-talk and catastrophizing, and that's going to just increase the likelihood that that's going to happen, and also make it so we can't deal with the effects of it. Right? So positive visualization. Imagine yourself as you prepare, saying what you want to say, feeling good about that, making eye contact with the audience, seeing them smile at you, reacting positively to what you're saying. Imagine all those things, and it's going to change how you feel. And your brain doesn't actually know the difference in practicing things in the language, which is why people use this frequently for things. Also, some positive self-talk. If you tell yourself, right, the other things you mentioned at the very beginning is, I'm not a natural speaker, I'm not very good at speaking. What is that doing by saying that to yourself? Yeah, and depending on the kind of mindset you have about learning and growth, you might say, well, that's been how I'm always going to do. I'm just not good at it. And how are you ever going to get any better if you don't believe that's even possible? Versus, like, I'm still learning about this. I'm doing the best I can. People want to hear what I have to say. I can do hard things. This is important to me. All that positive self-talk shifts the way you feel in that preparation phase. Then there's the moment right before you speak. Any of you remember what it feels like the moment before you stand up? How many of you feel like just your whole body is like vibrating? I can't breathe, like the butterflies, that kind of thing. That's because that's the body's response to prepare us. You're having a stress response to prepare you for this thing that's important to you. And that can be really good. It can help focus you, but that energy, that excess energy that gives you, can be really problematic when you're trying to speak, right? Because when you get up here, you're like, I can move, right? And the hands are going, and it can start coming out in distracting ways. So right before you get up, you have to do some things that release the energy from your body and relaxes you. So take a lap around the building. If you can't do that, you can do something called exercise. Love the name of this. You start with, do it with me. Start with your toes. I want you to flex your muscles in your toes. Right? Just flex them, make them tight. Take all of your foot, flex your foot. Move up to your calves. I'm doing this with you right now. You can't tell, right? Flexing my calves. Now move up into your thighs. Your thighs, your glutes. Open it all up. Stomach. Okay. Hands, arms, chest. Right? And on the count of 3, I just want you to release all that. 3, 2, 1. Right? You feel that just rush right out of your body. It's a really good way of kind of expelling some of that energy right before you get up to the top. And then also take some deep breaths. Imagine you're introduction that you're going to say, the first few things. Feel confident, and that's going to kind of propel you into what you do while you're actually speaking. And then while you're speaking, it's a different level of anxiety, right? Sometimes we get stuck in our own head. So you want to try to move out of that by making eye contact with people. You would think that that's not what you want to do. Like some people will stare at the back of the room or above people's heads or at the floor. You will actually feel better, more connected with you make eye contact. It's particularly nice if you have a plan. There's a few people that I've spoken to where they're just the best audience members ever. I'm like, you come to all my people, right? Because they're like, yeah, like nodding your head and getting into it and smiling at me, and it just makes it feel like, yeah, I want an audience full of you. Like, so make some contact like that with somebody, and it's going to make you feel better during it. And then you want to remind yourself to do things like breathe, slow down, pause, all the stuff that would be easy to forget when you start to feel anxious. And those reminders will bring you back to your breath and your body, and slow it down for you so your mind isn't racing. And then, the more you practice doing those things leading up to it, the more capable you are of doing it. Does that help to give you some ways to address that? Yeah.
One thing, quick questions for variation is you stand in front of a mirror, you stand in front of an interview, you actually get the whole speech over.
Yeah.
I think that takes a lot of time to do that.
It does. Do you know what they add? If you're going to do a well-prepared speech, they suggest that on average, every minute that you're speaking is an hour of preparation. And that's kind of reasonable, isn't it? If you think about it, the amount of time it takes to prepare, research, practice. And when you have that much behind what you're doing, whether it's in front of a mirror or in front of an audience or while you're brushing your hair or wherever you can get that practice, it's better. Like as you were practicing the guitar, would you sometimes like finger notes on the steering wheel while you're driving, or right? Anything you could do throughout the day was practice. Of course, the best practice is getting the guitar in your hand and really digging into it, right? Being purposeful about it. That's the best kind of practice. But all of the practice potentially can help. And the more you can recreate the situation you're actually going to be in, the more likely that practice is going to be useful. Right? Mm-hmm.
About female
Yeah.
personality. So sometimes with doing that, I had an effect on the audience where it was more distracting because it was a bit astral to speak with different.
Yeah.
So what things can you change around, and what things should you
Yeah.
or stick to?
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that sometimes you feel some tension between being me and adapting to my audience. Yeah, and both of those things are important. So I don't know if it's a choose one over the other, but you want to consider each one of those things. I'm all about not saying here's exactly how you ought to speak or the best way to do it. I really think it's important to give people what they need to make choices about what they're going to do. And when you make a choice to do that, it's going to come with some consequences, right? You choose to be true to some part of who you are, and you find that people don't react to it the way you want. Now, you can learn something from that choice. Am I willing to give that thing up in order to have this thing? Or is it more important for me to do this? Like as you're thinking about selling yourself or your ideas to those people, there are probably things you're willing to do and not willing to do. And when you make those choices, they're going to have consequences. And when you made a conscious choice, you're going to feel good about it, even if, no matter what happens. And because you made a choice, you're going to be able to look back and say, would I do that again? What do I want to do next time? How can I learn from that and grow from it? And I think it's really hard to learn without making choices first. So what I would be encouraging for you is to explore your choice, to think about what am I willing to do, what am I not willing to do, what's important to me, why do I want to do this? That help? It doesn't give you an answer, but it will help you make a choice on it. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to get information in making that choice, right? How does it affect you when I speak? Which is why I frequently ask people to give me feedback. What do you notice and how does that impact you? And so when my wife tells me, you touch your face a lot, I get to make a choice like, all right, do I want to be a face toucher? Or now that I know that's how it impacts her, it distracts her, what do I want to do with that? And I decided I don't want to do that anymore. So even though this was never just naturally me, I chose to do it and I'm comfortable with it. And I keep doing it because it's much more effective than what I was doing before. Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of it's like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Each one of those is going to make it important change in the way you approach it. So if the audience and change the most questions you make how you really want that. Yeah. And I want to be adaptable, capable of adapting, because I want to speak to more than just one group of people. I really enjoy teaching and speaking to colleges, students, and adults. But I've also taken opportunities and had to learn how do I speak to younger people, which is just not my thing. That's not naturally what I want to do all the time. So I gave a speech a couple months ago to Box Elder High School. For the whole week, a bunch of high school students in a big auditorium. That is not my crowd. Okay? I graduated before they were born. And I often find that they are a more difficult audience to keep their attention. Right? And I want people listening to me that want to listen to me, and I find that sometimes they don't. And so it was just a crowd that was hard for me and that I didn't just naturally feel comfortable with. But I figured some things out and learned to adapt to them because I still want to get some things across. Still things that are important to me that I want to be able to share with high school age students. And with my daughter, who just turned 15. Figure out. I can't talk to her like I talk to you. It doesn't work. So I'm trying to figure out how to adapt to that. I think it's a crucial part. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, in each one of those, you've got choices, don't you? And I think the theme here that you're identifying is time matter. Time matters in speaking, doesn't it? I haven't had very many experiences where people complain about me being short. But I definitely know that you're expecting to get out of here at one time, at least by 1:30. I promise you, no matter how important what I'm saying is, at 1:31, you're done, right? Like mentally, you are gone. You're packing up. How many of you start packing up your stuff about 3 minutes before the class ends? Like I've seen that kind of trend of bags are zipping up. I'm like, they are no longer mentally there with me. And so it's good to realize, even if the most important thing in my speech is still coming up and has not been said, they're not going to really be listening to you, paying attention to you in the same way if you're going over time. So this was hammered home for me when I was a graduate student at the University of Montana. In my master's program, I was preparing to go on to a PhD. I applied to the schools I wanted to go to, and the choice was the University of Utah, that program. And I was doing a conference in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and the grad director was coming up to that conference. And she said, oh, I'll come by your presentation. Right? So my application is in, and I'm presenting some of my work there, and she's going to be there. This is like an intense opportunity for me. And so I practiced it. I really prepared my speech, and I was sitting in one of my peers' rooms, going over it one more time. I looked over at the clock, and I realized that between Montana and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, I had crossed the 10 there, and I was on my way. So I go rushing through the hotel, down to the room. I get to the door, and I hear clapping. And as I'm opening, I hear them say, our next presenter is Clair Canfield, and I haven't seen her yet. And so I walk right up the aisle to the podium, and I'm like, hi, I'm Claire, and make a joke about being late and that I'm a man and not a woman. And then proceeded with my speech as I looked down and see her on the second row. Right there. I can still see her in my mind. She's right there where you were. And I am mortified that I came in late, right? So afterwards, that evening, there was like a party cruise around the lake, a cruise kind of thing, right? Cocktails and snacks and stuff. So I'm on that, and I see her across the room, and I'm like, suck it up. You got to do some damage control. Go over there, talk to her. So I go over, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It was this time change. I'm late, and she's like, oh, no, you were great. And then she went on a 5-minute rant about the person who spoke after me, like 10 minutes over. And later, when I did get accepted there, later, a couple of years later, I talked to her. I'm like, do you remember that time you came up? Oh my gosh, I was so scared. She's like, no, I don't remember that at all. But she did remember the person who spoke right after me, who went 10 minutes long, right? Because those kind of things have time limits, and other people are waiting to see the 4 speakers, and then you've got the next panel, that kind of thing. And she had no patience, no time. Nobody's got time for that, right? When somebody is going over their time. So it's good to recognize this really matters to audiences. If you go over your time, if you can't keep it within the parameters that you've been given, doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to lose some of it. So some of that, the other situations, adapting to it, go back to what you know, what's your purpose. If you keep that in mind, it doesn't matter whether you have 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 hours, you're still trying to accomplish the same thing. You just have less time to do it. So always go back to your purpose and bring your comments always directed towards that. And then it doesn't matter how much time you do it. Does that help? Give you some ways to think about that? Okay. Any questions on that? One of the things you'll find when you stand in front of a group of people and you care about what you're doing is it's going to key you into things that are important to you, and it's It's going to bring all your issues into the room with you. It's really interesting how this happens. It's like spotlights aimed at you. And in particular, there's three things that universally people care about. We call it face needs. You've heard this term before, face needs. They're universal. They are needs that we have in which we desire other people to see us a particular way. Three important things we want other people to see us as. Number one, we want to be seen as competent. We want other people to think we're capable of what we're doing, whether it's playing a guitar or speaking or have you noticed how important competency is to you in situations? Sometimes we'll go to great lengths to feel competent. Have you ever played Candy Crush? Yeah. Yeah, you familiar with that game? So I played it for a while, and on Candy Crush they show a little dot, like where you are and where other people are that you know, and what level they are. And the game was fun at first. It's like, oh yeah, that's the level. And then I got to a point, and it wasn't that much fun anymore. But I wasn't as high up on the levels as the other people. I'm like, I got this, right? And I'd go back in, and I'd pass some more levels so that I could get up there. I passed all the levels. Eventually, I passed all the levels till there weren't any more. And then they kept making more. I eventually just had to really off my hat. But way past the enjoyment level of playing Candy Crush, I kept playing it because I was going to be good at it. Have you ever done something like that? Gone to great lengths just to be good at something, to feel confident at something? Yeah. Yeah, right? Immediately when I said that, you're like, I know what that means. Because we want to feel that other people see us as confident. Second thing is that other people see us as independent. That we make our own decisions, that we live our lives, that we are our own unique human beings. And when people try to start impeding our choices and our independence, we'll be really resistant. We do not like being seen as controlled by other people. How many of you have had somebody give you advice or tell you you should do something that you thought you probably should do, wanted to do, was maybe good for you, but you were not going to do that thing anymore because they told you to, and nobody's going to tell me what to do, right? Like I was planning on it up front, but not anymore. No? Have you done that? Yeah, that's an independence issue, right? Like, even though I wanted to do that thing, it's good for me. No, I choose. And then third is likability. We want to be seen as likable by other people, that we are someone that others desire to know or be close to or connect with. This is why Facebook, the name Facebook, is the perfect representation of what that thing is. What do people post on Facebook, on social media? Do you show your entire life to people? You let them know, like, oh, yeah, I've got a poor performance of you at work today. No, you post when you get promoted. You post when you go on vacation. Look at the amazing meal I made. Look how many likes that I have, right? I mean, the whole thing is built on I'm likable, like me, like all the things that I put on here. Be my friend, like the stuff. I'm confident, I'm independent, I'm likable. We desire to be seen that way by people. Now, when you stand up here, what is potentially threatened? All three of those things, right? So we can suddenly feel like these people are judging my likability. Like, feel that way? Like, people are going to respond to me? They're going to like me? People are judging my competency. You know what you're talking about? You ever been terrified to say, I don't know? And then like a question and answer session? That's scarier for some people than the actual speaking part, because other people need to ask them questions. What if they ask me something I don't know? You can't possibly know everything, but yet there's still this sense that I have to know. I need to be confident in front of these people. I know it all. So when you speak, it's not unusual to have that stuff. I find it really useful to remind myself this started with me and something I wanted to accomplish. But after I start with that, it's irrelevant. This is really about other people. And they aren't thinking about my confidence. They're thinking about how this relates to them. And do I have something to offer? And when I shift my focus away from myself, all those issues start to settle down a little bit, because I'm not focused internally, I'm focusing externally. That's been a really good help. Okay, we got 5 minutes. I know you want to speak. You plan to keep an early, but if we got more questions, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they were saying, they're talking about this. And apparently, but there is a difference how a woman speaking to the perceive is she's very good to men speaking to perceive is very good. And what the computer understanding was that a woman is perceived like less competent, less knowledgeable, and more than but all the opposite is true for men. So in many different it's seen as a immature guy who is very competent and knowledgeable in this area. So I was wondering, you actually think because that was like mind-blowing for me.
Unfortunately, that just reflects larger issues, right? That exist not just in public speaking, but generally speaking, that there are differences in the way men and women are valued. As leaders, as speakers, as human beings, like it is not equal. And so, unfortunately, every time you speak, you can only speak out of your body. And that means that there's going to be a particular type of response, and you can't control all of those things. But it is useful to know, as unfortunate as it is, that people are going to respond to me differently because I'm tall, I have an amazing beard, and I'm male, right? And people are going to respond to that differently than they will out of somebody who has a shorter body. It's a female body, right? It just, that's going to happen. Of course, that wasn't the case. For example, I also wish it wasn't the case that this is what people respond to as being more credible dress-wise than what I would want to wear today, which is a hoodie and some jeans. Like that's what I'm comfortable in, and that's what I would otherwise be wearing. But I'm wearing this because studies have shown audiences make evaluations about the credibility of the speaker based on how they dress within the first 15, 30 seconds. And this is seen as more professional and credible. So it's just useful information to be able to know and respond to. And for me to put my energy where I can control things and let go of the stuff that I can't. Like I can't change the body of the meeting. I can't change the fact that people respond differently. Yes. I just get to make some choices about it. So, unfortunately, yeah, you're spot on. Different. And there are going to be some advantages to that and disadvantages. Like I have the advantage of I can talk about certain things. What's coming out of this body. Right? Other people that can talk about it have a different impact. And that means that I can sometimes reach different audiences in different ways. But it's kind of sucky reality. Yeah. Okay, tell me more. Yeah. Does that actually happen? Yeah, it actually happens.
there's no praise. The product is hungry. I put this out for this global audience. If you can pay attention, the small things we get before. And this one, actually, I'm the really speakers who have been wonderful. And it's just,
That's one of my favorite speakers. As an audience member, that becomes our responsibility, is to not make judgments about the speaker based on, not make judgments. So it's useful to think of ourselves not just as speakers, but also as audience members. And so how am I listening? What are the biases that I might be walking into the room with? How can I set those aside so that I can truly evaluate what they're trying to share with me, instead of making snap determinations about how they look and what they're dressed as? You ever heard about the study that did blind auditions for orchestras? So this study found that in orchestras, the big ones that are professional, like London Philharmonic Orchestra, that kind of thing, they found a disproportionate number of men versus women, particularly in certain instrumental areas. So what they started doing is having blind auditions. They would play behind the curtain so you couldn't see them. So there was this short Asian woman who played the tuba, a big instrument, right? Who had never come in better than third chair in anyone she had, but as soon as they did the blind one, she was ranked well above every other person. And it was simply because they made determinations about her based on what she looked like instead of what she sounded like. So you're right, the more we can try to remove those biases, the better we are as audience members. Keep it delightful. Enjoy it. I hope that that's something that you can take with you, and don't expect that just because you know that stuff, you're immediately going to be good at it. It's going to be practice and reps. But you've got what it takes to make the choices, learn from them, and you can be effective, whoever you are, whatever your voice is.